All right, guys. I'm going to be working with my friend John Boner here for this basic knee cut to side control. So it's just a knee cut from guard. And so we're going to be starting him off in kind of this seated guard position that you might be starting off like when you guys start up from your knees, where you know, you're making the decision not to engage by having two people up on their knees, right? And so when we do a basic knee cut, there are going to be kind of three different ways that you get into this position, and you're going to have to address a knee cut in three separate ways, depending on what your opponent gives you. And so when you're getting to this seated position where somebody's up like this, right? They're facing you. What's going to usually happen, you know, this might be because you're just starting off in this position, but let's say if you were actually doing an actual live roll where you started off standing, you got the takedown and all that, and you've been rolling for a while, what's generally going to happen here is that you were in a closed guard, and then you broke the guard, and then your opponent has decided to back off and then sit up so they can play this kind of open guard position. And there might be reasons why they might want to do that. But really, unless you're doing like more advanced BJJ or something like that, you're probably not going to see this position in a live roll other than when you're starting on your knees that often. The other way that you would see it is where you actually are already in between their legs, and a lot of times when people do that, they're going to still be reclined back on their back like John is here. So when I have this kind of situation, so he's sitting up here like here, he's got his hands in a protective position, which I can't do because he's a fucking Halloween decoration. Either that or he did keto for a little bit too long. So what's happened here is I'm going to step into the well, so I'm stepping between his legs here with one leg, and I've got my elbows in close. Now what I want to do here is I actually want to hug around him, and I'm going to grab right here underneath his lat, right there. And I want to try to get my shoulder pressure into his chin. So you see I've turned his head a little bit with that shoulder pressure. And at this point, I'm going to staple his leg down, and I'll turn around here in a second to show you guys that. But I'm not trying to put weight directly onto his femur here, because if I do that, it'll cause pain, and when he feels that pain, he's going to try to escape away from me very aggressively, and I might lose him. Instead, I just want to maintain connection. Sorry, there was a spider. Okay, so one of the reasons why I'm showing you this is I was recently teaching somebody this in person, and what happened is in this transition, the person had a tendency to just kind of plop onto their hip and create this space here. And what's going to happen here in this situation is your opponent, if he's any good whatsoever, is he's just going to climb right up on top of you, right? So when you're coming down, I'm going to want to get this staple, and I'm going to drop this elbow down to the ground. Before I even go down, I'm engaging my shoulder into his jawline a little bit. I'm not trying to hurt him, I'm just making that pressure happen, and I'm squeezing, and I'm giving him a little hug here. I'm going to put this post out a little bit, and I'm going to have my weight slightly forward. I don't want to come too forward so that I'm starting to bring up weight off of that leg that I have stapled down, but I have less of a risk because I've got this leg stapled down. He's not going to really be, it's not going to be very easy for him to bridge me and roll me this way. So just in case I do have this post out here that I can use, I don't even have to put it out that far. It could be close to his hip, but it's still a post, right? And I want my weight a little bit more forward. Ideally, I still want to keep it on this near side pec though. Right? So I don't want to be too much of a blanket here, but I also don't want to allow myself to plop before I'm ready to. Now, from here, you can pick up this inside leg. So this is an outside knee cut, right? And I call it an outside knee cut because the leg that started the knee cut is moving to the outside of his guard, right? Whereas this leg that's left behind is still on the inside of his guard. So that's why I call it that. So I'm here, I'm gonna bring my knees together so that my knee is on the outside of his hip. I do not want to get rid of this staple on his leg before I start to get this leg out, right? The reason for that is because if I remove this staple, he's going to put me in a half guard. His legs are just going to lock up on my leg, and then I have to deal with that bullshit. So I want to make sure that I've got a nice clean staple here, and then I put my knees together, and then I'm kind of almost using my knee as a wedge against my ankle to push that off. And from here, I'm going to straighten out the leg that's closest to his hips. Now you see that I am actually ending up perpendicular to his body. Right? This was another thing that was kind of happening with my friend, was that he was staying almost parallel in this position. And it's going to be very easy for him to start to roll up on top of me if that happens. So I want to get as parallel as possible, and then I want to bring my hip side knee all the way up to his hip, and I want to make connection. I'm going to take my elbow and I'm going to pinch those together. All right? So let's go ahead and do that from a little bit of a different angle. All right? So he's up in this seated position. I am going to step into the well, right, in between his legs. I'm going to get that connection, so I'm grabbing around his back and connecting to his lats, and then I roll my shoulder into his jawline, and then I bring my knee down to the ground, stapling his thigh to the ground. And you see that I am not, I'm not up on the staple, and I'm projecting forward. I'm not collapsing down. So I've got my weight pretty well forward here. Now I'm going to, I'll show you what I did the first time, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and bring my knees together. Boom. Right there. And then I'm going to straighten out my leg. I'm going to get rid of any daylight on this side while I bring up this knee all up to his hips, and I pinch together. Right? The other way I can perform this is I get this staple, I get this connection, I bring him down to the mats, I keep my weight a little bit to the front here, and then I can take a big back step this way, right? And with where my knee is right now with my my torn meniscus, that's a little bit more preferable to me. Now, if he is starting to come up into me, he's bridging into me, I can take this hand and I can underhook his thigh at pretty much any time in this, right? And if I do that, well, then he doesn't have this leg to bridge off of. And also he's getting his groin stretched a little bit, so he's not going to like that. So then I can start to roll my shoulder forward, and then I can bring my arm out and then get into the side control position. Sorry, I was here, so that my thigh is up. Or my knee is up by his hip, and I've got no daylight here. When I'm ready to progress to get into my attacks, then I'll go ahead and bring this knee up. All right, so that's going to be our first one, and that's a little bit more of a deep dive into a basic outside knee cut.